The text came while I was tying my shoes. Call me immediately. It was from my lawyer, a man who never used big words for small things. My first thought was that my daughter, Maris, had been in an accident. My second thought was that I should have charged my phone last night, because the battery icon was as red as a stop sign. I hit call with hands that felt older than my 67 years. He answered on the first ring. Harlan, do not go to your daughter's house tonight. Sit down. I was already sitting, but my knees still gave. You are about to be served with an emergency petition. Your daughter filed to take guardianship of you. She claimed you are confused, that you forget the stove, that your house is unsafe. She wants control of your accounts and the power to place you in a facility. I stared at the framed photo of my late wife on the mantel, at the sunline on the carpet where her recliner used to sit. I said one word. Why? The lawyer's voice was steady. She submitted statements from 2 neighbors. There's a note from a clinic that says you missed appointments. There is a list of your bank withdrawals. I told him the truth. The neighbors do not know me. The missed appointments were after the funeral. The bank withdrawals were for Maris when Calder lost his job. The line went quiet for a breath that felt like a mile of road. Harlan, he said, she also attached a plan. It names a nursing home in Brookside. It names herself as guardian. It asks the court to freeze your pension until a hearing next week. He spoke like a man carrying a heavy box. Slow and careful. Do not sign anything at the door. Do not talk to anyone until we meet in the morning. I am Harlan Whitaker, retired public school custodian, son of a machinist, father to 1. I have lived 52 years in this house on Lilac Court. My hands smell like lemon oil and cold metal, even after a decade off the job. I made every holiday work by taking extra shifts so Maris could have dolls with porcelain faces, then textbooks, then a used Honda, then a wedding by the river in June. When my wife, Lenore, got sick, I learned to cook oatmeal just the way she liked it, and I turned our living room into a gentle world with soft lamps and careful steps. I thought I had done enough good to be safe in old age. I thought love was a kind of fence that keeps wolves out. I thought wrong. Through the front window, I could see my reflection in the glass. White hair that I cut myself. A face like an old barn, weathered but standing. The streetlights came on as the sun slid down behind the maples. Somewhere a dog barked. I listened for a siren that never came. Instead, I heard that tiny phone click in my ear as the lawyer finished with instructions so simple a child could follow. Lock the door. Gather your documents. Call me if anyone arrives. Then he paused, and his voice softened in a way I had never heard before. Harlan, I know you love your daughter, but tonight, love must be quiet. Tonight, you must be careful. I hung up, and the house felt different, like the walls had inched closer while I was not looking. I walked from room to room with a folder in my hands. Birth certificate, marriage license, the deed, the pension papers with the ink dry, and my name proper. On Lenore's dresser lay the rosary she used to keep in her pocket. I do not pray often. I did anyway. Then I put on my coat because habit kept telling me there was chicken to roast and a granddaughter's hug to collect. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Maris. We cannot wait to see you, Dad. Drive safe. I stared at her words until they blurred. My porch light clicked on with the timer, washing the steps in yellow. A slow sound rose from the street. Tires crunching. A car eased to a stop in front of my driveway. Engine idling in a steady hum. 2 doors opened and closed. A knock came at the door. It was not the soft rap of family. It was the hard, flat knock of business. Papers shifted outside like a deck of cards being squared. I stood very still and thought of the lawyer's last line. Do not sign anything at the door. Through the peephole, I saw the edge of a badge and a second figure holding a clipboard. Then a third shape moved into view, a face I knew from the mirror of 1,000 breakfasts. My daughter, Maris, looking straight at my door with eyes I could not read. Her lips formed words I could not hear. The person with the badge raised a hand to knock again. What I did next would decide the rest of my life. I did not open the door. I spoke loud enough to be heard through the wood. I will see you in court with my lawyer. The badge holder said they were here to serve papers and verify my condition. Mara said, "Dad, please, just let me in so we can talk." Her voice had that bright edge I knew from when she wanted something costly. The person with the clipboard taped a thick packet to my glass. Calder's gray sedan idled under the streetlight, his profile a hard coin in the driver's seat. I waited until their footsteps faded and the sedan rolled away. Then I took the packet inside with gloves I kept for painting. I set it under a lamp and stood there, reading the first line twice before we'd go in. Emergency petition for temporary guardianship. I locked the door and felt the lock like a tiny rock in a landslide. I have known slow betrayals. When Calder lost his work at the plant, I said, "Come by on Fridays. I will help." I paid their power bill more times than I can count. I sold Lenore's antique sewing table to cover a furnace repair in their starter house. I refinanced my mortgage to help with their down payment and called an advance on the future. Mara sat at my kitchen table and said, "Dad, this is how families do it." The first time they asked me to sign something big, it was after Lenore's chemo, when the world still came in fog. It was a line of paper that said power of attorney, just in case. I told them no. We laughed a little, and the laugh had a wobble. A month later, I found a nursing home brochure in my mailbox. No return address, a place with a cheerful name and small print. I told myself it was a mix-up. I laid out my papers on the kitchen table, like a chessboard. Birth, marriage, deed, pension, last tax return. I took photos of each with my phone, then of the packet on the glass, the time stamp, the tape edge. I texted everything to my lawyer with a simple note, received and safe. I made a list on a yellow pad the way Lenore used to do. Call clinic for records. Call bank for statements. Find neighbors who will tell the truth about me. I went to the drawer where we kept coupons and found Orson Pike's card, my old union steward from the custodial crew, a man whose voice could sand a plank. He answered with a cough and said, "Harlan, say where and when." I told him I might need a place to sleep 2 nights. He said, "My back room is yours." Then he said something quiet that settled me. "Whatever this is, we will turn on the bright lights and we will see." Sleep did not come. Memory did. Maris at 5, knees scuffed, hair in wild pigtails, bringing me a paper heart with my name in crooked letters. Maris at 16, bright and restless, wanting out of our small town so badly she could taste it. The way she looked at Calder under the river lights on their wedding night, all belief and gold ribbon. Then later, at my table last winter, the same eyes but harder, asking again about that power of attorney. "Dad, you left the stove on once," she said. "I did, the week after the funeral. I bought an auto shut-off and a new smoke alarm the next day." I showed her the receipts. She smiled, but her mouth did not join in. She said, "I only want to protect you." She said the word facility like it was a clean room where love lived. I rinsed the dishes and felt old and useful and in the way. I packed a small bag, 2 shirts, socks, the good coat. I slid Lenore's rosary into the front pocket and her wedding band into the coin slot of my wallet. I wrapped our marriage license in plastic and tucked it under the floorboard loose plank I had pried up years ago for safekeeping. I left the TV on low, a nature show about rivers, so the house would sound lived in. The porch light clicked off on its timer, and the rooms grew deep again. Out back, the wind picked up. The gate latch rattled. I froze. Someone tried it once, then again. A small beam of light probed the gap in the fence, searching the shape of my yard. A voice flowed across the lilacs, calm and official. "City welfare check. Sir, we need to confirm you are all right." I stepped into the laundry room, and the cold bit through my socks. A shadow moved past the frosted window. Something tapped the glass, soft and testing. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket with a number I did not know. I had one chance to decide. Open the back door and step into whatever story they brought, or slip out the side gate to Orson's truck that I now heard idling 2 streets over, hidden and waiting. I slipped through the side gate with the quiet a janitor learns on wax floors, keys in my fists like a small brass animal. The alley behind Lilac Court was all shadows and trash cans, and the air smelled like wet cardboard. Orson's truck idled 2 streets over just as I had guessed, the hood trembling like a patient horse. He leaned across and pushed the door open. "No lights. Harlan," he said. We slid away while the voice at my back door kept calling Sir, as if Sir could turn a door handle. I watched my house shrink in the side mirror until it was only the square of the kitchen window. Pale and worried, Orson drove with both hands, elbows locked, the way men who have seen trouble drive. He said nothing until we hit the county road. Then he asked the one question I could not dodge. When did you first feel your girl could do you harm? I told him the date, like a password. The week after Lenore's funeral. Orson's place sat behind a decommissioned feed mill, a low bungalow with shutters the color of old pennies. He kept the back room for his grandkids when they passed through, 2 twin beds, a dresser that smelled like cedar, a window that looked a line of maples, and a chain-link fence. He poured coffee that could wake a stone and put a yellow legal pad in front of me. Write the names, he said. Everyone who can vouch for your head and your hands. I wrote Mrs. Talbot from church, who watched me fix the parish boiler without a diagram. I wrote Araceli Duarte, the clinic nurse who knows I show up early and carry my own clipboard. I wrote Julian Crow at the bank, who has seen me balance my checkbook at the counter with a fountain pen and patience. I wrote down stains of memory next to each name, so I would remember the moment, not just a person. I called Julian first, because money is the hook that drags a man where he does not want to go. She answered on the second ring like always, and her voice softened when she heard mine. Harlan, she said, are you safe? I told her just enough. She put me on hold and came back with a careful voice. There were attempts today, she said, to add an authorized user to your pension account. A guardianship filing does not grant that, not without the order. We flagged it. There's also a cashier's check request for $40,000 pending for tomorrow morning, made out to Brookside Care Holdings. My chest felt the way it did when the custodian closet door swung closed on my knuckles too fast. Cancel it, I said. She said not without your signature in person, but she could freeze the account and generate a printout of all requests. I told her I would be there when the bank opened. She said bring identification and bring a witness. Orson tapped the table and said my name will do. We move like men who know mornings matter. Orson dug out a box of his old union newsletters for envelopes I could repurpose. He showed me a portable scanner he used for hunting permits, and we fed it my documents, one by one, until each had a twin living in a thumb drive wrapped in blue tape. He called a woman named Imogene who lived 2 blocks over, a retired court clerk with a memory like a ledger. She agreed to meet us at dawn to explain the judge's assignment and the rhythm of emergency hearings. I copied the stove receipt, the smoke alarm purchase, the massage of little proofs that my house and my mind still had clear lines. Then, because I am not only a defendant but father, I scrolled through Maris's message thread. There was a photo from last spring at the farmer's market, her arm looped through mine, strawberries bright as Christmas. I stared until my eyes stung, and I asked myself what broke. Orson said softly that love could be true and still dangerous if someone is drowning in want. The petition packet lay on Orson's table like a dare. I read it slower now, looking for the seam where truth had been bent. On page 7, a clinic note said I had missed a cognition screening in May. The signature at the bottom was not the doctor I know, but a physician assistant I had never met. The clinic header listed a walk-in satellite office that closed 2 years ago. I took a photo and sent it to Araceli with a question mark. She replied before the dots had time to dance. Not our note, she wrote. Wrong letterhead. She added that the physician assistant name does not work there. A minute later, she sent a second message. I will swear to that. I flipped another page and found a notary statement from my neighbor, a man whose name I did not recognize, that claimed I asked him 3 times what day it was at the mailbox. The notary was Tessa Givens, a sorority friend of Maris from college. I remembered Tessa at the wedding. Hair like new copper, laughter sharp, always with a pen. Orson's finger rested on the notary stamp, and he whistled low. This is where we make the light bright, he said. That was when my phone buzzed again, an alert from the bank at an hour no bank should be waking anyone. A new account had been opened in my name at a branch across town, online, with a mailing address that was not mine. The alert ended with a line that turned my mouth dry. If this was not you, please visit branch immediately with identification. Then a second buzz followed it, this one a text from Maris. Please stop, Dad. You are only making it worse. Orson's porch light flicked on by itself, sweeping across the quilt of his lawn. Tires whispered to a stop outside. A car door opened. A man's voice said my name as if he already owned it. What I said next would either save my house or lock me out of it forever. The voice outside said my full name like a verdict. I looked at Orson, and he nodded as if we had rehearsed this moment in another life. He stepped out first, porch light behind him, phone held low to record. I stood in the doorway with the chain latched. The man on the walk wore a jacket with a private badge sewn on, not a deputy's shield. A second man waited by a hatchback with Brookside Care printed on a magnetic sign. The badge man said welfare check again. I said my lawyer advised no contact and no entry. Orson asked for their credentials and read them back slow. The Brookside man tried to look past me into the room. I closed the gap on my shoulder and kept my voice even. I am safe. I declined. The badge man's mouth tightened. He slid a business card through the crack. Then the two men retreated to the car and lingered with their engine running, like weather that refuses to break. When the taillights finally bled away, Orson locked the deadbolt and poured fresh coffee that tasted like burnt sugar and grit. Imogene arrived at dawn in a denim jacket and trainers, gray hair pinned with two bobby pins that flashed when she turned. She spread a courthouse map on the table and tapped circles with a pen. Emergency guardianships are ex parte if they claim danger, she said, but judges still need clean evidence. A fake clinic note is not clean. A notary with ties to the petitioner is not clean. She told me we would file a response and an emergency motion of our own, asking the court to bar removal from my home until a full hearing. She told me to place a fraud alert with the credit bureaus, to freeze everything that could be frozen. She used small, sharp words like nails. Then she looked at me a long beat. Harlan, she said, you will need to be calm in the hall and fierce on the paper. At the bank, when the doors unlocked, Julian met us with a stack of files, and that look a person wears when they've had to unlearn something about the world. She froze my pension account with 2 keystrokes and printed the attempted transactions. The pending cashier's check request had a note field. Brookside Deposit, it read, with a 9-digit number beside it. Julian frowned deeper. That number is not a resident account, she said. It is an operating ledger. She slid over an image from a security camera. It showed a woman at a branch kiosk across town with a scarf over her hair, head tilted away from a lens. Julian drew a square around the wrist. A bracelet I recognized, 3 thin bands braided together. Maris wore it at Thanksgiving when she carved the turkey too fast and laughed at her own clumsiness. My stomach turned hard. Julian leaned in and softened her voice. We will keep the logs. We will testify. I thought of the small signs I had stepped over. The garage key gone from its peg for 2 days last March, then reappeared with a tiny nick I could feel but not see. The pantry inventory that never stayed right, as if someone were counting my cans and measuring my life in ounces. Calder's jokes that were not jokes about slick new facilities with pickleball courts and movie nights. The way Maris said, Dad, you deserve a rest, like rest was a box with a lid. Love had not ended in our house. It had bent like a board left in rain. In Orson's back room that afternoon, I wrote a letter I did not send. I told my daughter I would rather live small and true than big and quiet. I told her father is not a wallet and not a broken fence. I folded it and put it in my coat. Orson listened without filling the silence, then said the gentlest hard thing I have heard. You can love her and still set a lock. We drove to the clinic. Araceli met us at the back door with her badge turned backward and her hair tucked into a cap. She had already pulled my chart and printed a letter on official letterhead that said I had attended all scheduled visits since Lenore's passing and had never been diagnosed with cognitive impairment. She attached a copy of the physician assistant roster, which did not include the name on the petition. She added a photograph of the shuttered satellite office, windows papered over, sign gone. The doctor annealed each page with a careful hand and signed a 1-paragraph declaration. Imogene notarized the packet with a stamp, so firm it left the paper warm. When we stepped back into the daylight, a dark van idled at the curb half a block down. Orson lifted his phone and snapped its plate framed by a maple limb. My lawyer called while we were still in the lot. The hearing, he said, had been moved up to the afternoon on Maris's request, citing urgent placement. Bring everything. Bring yourself steady. The courthouse smelled like wood polish and old paper. People moved with the fast slow of fear and habit. In the corridor outside Courtroom 3, I saw Maris first. Her hair was pulled into a neat knot I had only seen at interviews. Calder stood beside her in a suit that fit like a new promise. A woman in a cream blazer hovered at their elbows, holding a folder with Brookside embossed on the corner. Maris's eyes found mine, and for a second she was 5 again, and I was the person who could fix her shoelace. Then something closed in her face like a door. The bailiff called the case, and the room stood. We filed in, our papers held like shields. The judge took the bench and began to speak in a voice that was both kind and tired. Before anyone could argue, the Brookside woman stepped forward and moved to admit the emergency placement plan. The judge lifted a hand to slow her. Then he turned to me, and his next sentence turned the floor to glass. There's an outstanding pickup order, he said. Absent clear evidence to counter risk, Mr. Whitaker will be placed at Brookside tonight, pending a full hearing. You have 5 minutes to show cause. The clock on the wall clicked once, loud as a hammer. The clock ticked again, and my mouth went dry. I stood, palms on the table, and spoke plain. I am steady. I live alone. I cook my meals. I pay my bills. Then I lifted the thin stack we had built through the night. Imogene moved beside me like a conductor. Your Honor, she said, we have exhibits. She gave the court the clinic letter with the doctor's signature, the roster with no such physician assistant, and a photograph of the shuttered office the petition claimed I attended. The judge's eyes narrowed. He turned the page and tapped the old address with his pen. Orson slid the bank printouts across. An attempted guardianship withdrawal to an operating ledger, he said, not a resident account. My banker stands by, ready to testify by phone. The judge looked toward the clerk. In the gallery, the Brookside liaison shifted and cleared her throat. The clock ticked again. My own breath sounded like paper. Maris's lawyer rose fast. He called it a misunderstanding, a clerical drift, a daughter's good faith. He said my miscognition screening was an honest effort to protect me. He said a power of attorney had been discussed many times, and I had grown stubborn and suspicious after grief. He glanced at me as if to make the word grief do his work. I kept my eyes on the bench. Imogene's finger touched another page. The notary, she said quietly, is a petitioner's close friend. That is not disqualifying itself, but when combined with false clinic note, it colors everything. The judge asked for the notary's log. The cream blazer from Brookside did not move. Orson slid his phone forward. He had a still frame from the bank kiosk. The bracelet on the wrist circled with a pen. The judge studied it, then looked at Maris. Ms. Whitaker, he said, did you attempt to move funds today? Maris stood, hands clasped so tight the knuckles went pale. She said the words that always used to charm teachers and managers and told clerks. Dad has made dangerous choices, she said. He left the stove on. He repeats questions. He threw away an entire bottle of his blood pressure pills last month. I felt the room tilt. I kept my voice even. I left the stove on after the funeral. I replaced it with an auto shut-off unit, and I installed a new alarm. The receipts are there. As for the pills, I switched brands at the doctor's advice. Araceli's letter confirms it. The judge turned to the Brookside woman. On what date was placement requested? She answered with a date from last week. Imogene stepped in on the beat. Your Honor, the bank attempted cashiers check his date of the day after placement was requested. She let the timing hang like a faint bell. The judge's brow pinched at the bridge. The judge asked to hear from the clinic. The clerk dialed and put the phone on speaker. Araceli's voice came through small but firm. She verified my appointments, my screenings, and the fact that no one at the clinic believed I required guardianship. She named the physician assistant who did work there and the one named on the petition who did not. She said she would appear in person, if the court wished. The judge thanked her, and his tone softened an inch. Then he looked at me the way a neighbor might, curious and careful. Mr. Whitaker, He said, "What do you do each day? Tell me from when you rise to when you go to bed." I told him my morning walk to the corner where the creek starts, the oatmeal with blueberries, the crossword I finish in ink, the Thursdays at church fixing what leaks, the afternoons at the library where I read the paper and show kids how to use the microfilm machine. The judge listened without glancing at the clock. Maris's lawyer reached for one more arrow. He raised the phone and said there is video. It showed me in my driveway last month, standing still for a long minute with my keys in my hand, then trying the car door twice like I had forgotten how locks work. The camera's date stamp glowed in the corner. Calder leaned against the rail with a tight smile. Orson stepped closer to the screen and flicked his nail against the wood. "Your Honor," he said, "that is my union's safety course parking lot in the background. Those stripes are ours. That video is not his driveway." Imogene asked the clerk to pause. She zoomed, and there was a painted number 3 from Orson's lot, white and chipped. The judge looked at Maris a long time. He leaned forward and laced his fingers. He began to speak, and the bailiff took one step toward me, as if the words would be a chain. Then the courtroom door opened in a rush, and a woman hurried in, breathless, badge on a lanyard, a clipboard hugged to her chest. She said one sentence that made the Brookside liaison blanch. "Your Honor, I am the real physician assistant named in the petition, and I need to correct the record." The physician assistant, a lean woman with steady eyes, gave her name as Rowan Mace and took the stand like someone who had eaten courthouse air before. She spoke slow so no comma could slip out of place. "I did not examine Mr. Whitaker," she said. "I did not write or sign the note in this petition. That letterhead is from a satellite office closed 2 years ago. That signature looks like mine, but it is not mine." The judge asked 2 questions that cut to the bone. Could this be an error? Could this be fraud? Rowan answered the first with no, and the second with a measured yes. The room changed temperature. The Brookside liaison sat smaller in her chair. Maris stared at the table, as if the grain could explain itself. The judge called a 10-minute recess. I stood in a hallway under a painting of a river and counted my breaths until I could swallow. During the recess, Imogene murmured the next moves like a coach at halftime, motioned to strike the petition as defective, motioned to bar ex parte contact with Brookside, criminal referral on suspected forgery. Orson drifted toward the bench where Calder leaned with a face that said he had already won last week. "You men like to play chess with other people's roofs," Orson said, so mild it took a beat to land. Calder smirked and then lost it when Julien's voice came bright on my phone speaker. She had located the online new account application. The IP address traced to a coffee shop near the Brookside office. The application used an email that was not mine and a contact number that matched a card in the Cream Blazers folder. Imogene's eyebrows climbed. She whispered that sometimes money moves in the shadow of care, and that light breaks those deals. Then the bailiff called us back, and the judge returned, robe hanging heavy like rain. The judge spoke in a tone that could sand a plank. "The emergency pickup order is vacated. The petition is held in abeyance pending a full evidentiary hearing in 7 days. All parties are ordered to preserve documents and refrain from any financial transactions on Mr. Whitaker's accounts." He turned to Maris, and his voice softened without losing the edge. "Ms. Whitaker, if you continue this petition, you and your counsel should expect questions about these irregularities." He turned to me. "Mr. Whitaker, you may return to your home. There will be no placement tonight." I nodded and sat with my knees asked. Relief did not feel like joy. It felt like air after a long hallway. Maris rose and asked to speak. The judge allowed 1 minute. She talked about worry and love and the stove again. She never said the bracelet or the bank. She never looked at me. When we filed out, she brushed past as if the hall were too narrow for fathers. In the daylight after a storm, things looked sharper. Orson drove me home. The tape from the petition still clung to the glass. The kitchen smelled like old lemons in me. I walked through each room and touched the back of the chair I had sat in that morning, the counter where I had folded the deed, the spot on the mantel where Lenore's picture lives. I felt steadier than I had in months. Then a small hand knocked at the door in a rhythm I knew. My granddaughter, Iola. stood on the porch in a jean jacket too big in the shoulders, her hair in a messy knot, eyes red at the rims. She stepped in without waiting and whispered that she could not stay long. She pulled a phone from her pocket and showed me a video she had taken in her mother's kitchen. Calder sat at the table with the cream blazer woman. The words were clear as a church bell. "We get him in for 30 days, the woman said. The facility fee clears, and your consulting invoice gets paid." Iola pressed pause and looked up. "Grandpa," she said, "Mom owes them." I closed my eyes and saw not wolves at the fence, but a daughter already caught in teeth. We watched the rest. Maris entered halfway through and asked if it would be quick. Calder said quick if Dad stops fussing. The woman slid a paper across and tapped a line. "A referral fee," she said, dressed as consulting, "payable on placement." She used the word routine like a lullaby. Iola swallowed. "Mom's business flopped after Christmas," she whispered. "She took a bridge loan from a man who knows the Brookside lady. They want their return." I asked how she knew. She shrugged, small and brave. "I heard things. They talk like doors do not echo." Behind her, the kettle clicked. I set out cups because ordinary action saved men. Orson listened with his arms crossed, jaw tight. Imogene sat at the table and wrote 3 words on a new page. "Pattern of inducement." She said them like a pin slipped into a map. Then she looked at me as if asking whether I wanted to spend the next week fighting or building. I said both. The next hours moved like strong hands. We backed up Iola's video to a drive, printed stills, and wrote a clean chain of custody on a note card in big letters. Imogene called the county prosecutor's office and left a message that hummed with facts, not anger. Orson phoned a reporter he knew at the local paper, a woman named Darby, who had written about the feed mill layoffs and told the truth even when the ads pulled. Julian set a fraud watch on every account with a code word only Iola knew. I changed my porch light timer to a different pattern and swapped out the spare key hiding place Lenore had chosen years ago because grief makes families lazy. Then I took out the letter I had written to Maris, and I read it aloud to an empty room. I told the heir that I would help her if she told the truth and stopped the petition. I told the heir that love has rules. I folded the letter and did not seal it. That was when a police cruiser glided to a stop in front of my house. 2 officers stepped out, not rushing, not slow. The older one held a new paper. He lifted his eyes and asked my name softly, as if he hated the question. He said they had a fresh order from a different judge in a different county, filed an hour ago, authorizing a wellness transport due to credible risk. He said Brookside had a bed waiting. Iola's hand found mine and squeezed. "Sir," he said, "we can do this the hard way or the kind way." I looked past him to the street, where a dark van had already parked on a maple, its side door open like a mouth. The older officer kept his hand open, palm up, as if offering a small bird. I breathed once and nodded toward my table where the first judge's order lay on top, big as a stop sign. "This order vacates the pickup," I said. "Different county or not, you cannot remove me on a duplicate claim without seeing this." Imogene stepped forward, voice steady as a level. "Sergeant, under your own policy, voluntary evaluation at a hospital is preferred over third-party transport to a private facility." She named the page and paragraph. The younger officer glanced at his partner. I added one more brick. "I will go, but only to County General for an assessment, and my lawyer will meet me there." Orson had his phone on speaker already. "Harlan is cooperating," the lawyer said, "and any Brookside employee who steps on that porch will be filmed for prosecutor." The officers exchanged a look that belonged to fathers. The sergeant nodded. "County General," he said, "not Brookside." We walked out together, slow. The Brookside van waited like a dark mouth. The cream blazer woman stepped forward with a clipboard and that easy smile people use on the gullible. The sergeant lifted a hand without words. "Not today, ma'am." She tried again. "We have a bed." He did not blink. "Not today." Orson locked my door and pocketed the key like a promise. Iola climbed into the cruiser's back seat beside me because the sergeant said family keeps fear small. At County General, a nurse with kind eyes took my vitals and asked me to draw a clock and name animals and remember 3 short words. I did the task with the same care I use to mop a hallway, one strip at a time, no skips. A young doctor ran through questions like mile markers. He shook my hand after, firm. "You're oriented and intact, sir." He printed his assessment and signed it, then handed it to me like a passport. By noon, the hospital room had turned into a small war room with vending machine coffee. Imogene faxed the clearance to the courthouse and emailed it to my lawyer. Orson called Julian to lift only the minimum holds and keep the rest frozen. Darby, the reporter, arrived with a notebook and a pair of tired sneakers. She had already pulled facility referral records, the kind nobody reads on purpose. She showed us a page that named Brookside's outreach consultants and the fee range for referrals that led to placements. She tapped a column with a pen. "That number is the same as the one on your attempted cashier's check," she said. She looked at Iola. "Can I use your video if I blur your face?" Iola glanced at me. I squeezed her hand and nodded. Darby wrote fast, lips pressed in. She said a judge likes light, and so do towns. Then she said the thing that slid the day one square forward. "Records show the second order. Judge's brother sits on the board of a Brookside foundation. Conflict of interest is a sky word, but it matters here." My lawyer arrived with a stack of papers and the clean smell of rain boots. He spread out forms with names that felt like locks. A supported decision-making agreement that affirmed I could choose helpers without giving up my rights. A fresh will that placed my small estate into a revocable trust. A trust document naming me as trustee and Iola as successor, with Orson as protector. The house titled into the trust so no one could snatch it with a stamp. "These are not weapons," he said gently. "They are fences that mark your choices." He asked the doctor to witness that I had capacity. The doctor signed with the slow pride of someone writing his name on a doorframe. Iola watched my pen move and wiped her eyes fast when she thought no one could see. Growth can be quiet. It can be a line on paper, and a girl deciding to sit closer to a grandfather. We left the hospital at 2, papers in a folder that felt heavier than its pages. The cruiser took us home with its lights off, so the neighbors would not raise a curtain. A silver sedan idled at the corner. Calder leaned on the hood with his hands in his pockets, looking like a man waiting for a bus that will not stop. He tried a grin. "Dad, let's make this simple," he said. "You sign the intake tonight, and we all sleep." I held up the doctor's clearance. "No." He looked past me at Iola. "You think you are smart enough for this." Iola stepped between us with her chin set the way her mother's used to be when she fought for field trip money. "I am smart enough to see you," she said. The sedan rolled forward and stopped short of my driveway. The cream blazer woman was behind the wheel. She leaned across and spoke through the open window. "This is only delaying the inevitable, Mr. Whitaker. The market is changing. Facilities fill fast. A bed is a privilege." I felt something old in me stand up straighter. Inside, I signed the trust and the agreement in the same kitchen where I once signed permission slips for picture day. Orson slid the originals into a fireproof envelope and tucked it into the floor safe he had installed for his union minutes years ago. Imogene filed electronic copies with the clerk. Julian called to say the bank had flagged a fresh attempt to open a home equity line against my address that morning from an out-of-county branch, and that she had stopped it with one word. "Code Marigold." She said, "The color of Lenore's mums in October." Iola laughed a little and cried a little more. Darby texted a link to her story. Brookside referral web tied to guardianship push. It read. The comments began to fill with names of cousins and neighbors who had seen something similar and had not known what to call it. The house felt less like a shrinking room and more like a place where people could knock and be let in. Late afternoon light warmed the wall, where Lenore's photo hangs. I stood there and told her out loud that the fence had held. Then the doorbell rang, a clean chime that did not sound like trouble. The sergeant stood there again, hat in his hands. His eyes were tired, but there was a small lift at the corners. "Sir," he said, "we just received a packet from the county prosecutor. They want statements from you, from your banker, and from your clinic. There may be charges." He paused and his voice lowered a shade. "And there is something else." He held up a thin manila envelope with my name printed by a mechanical typewriter. the way offices used to do it when letters were careful. This was dropped at the station 10 minutes ago by a woman who said to give it to you, no signature. He placed it in my hands and stepped back, as if the contents might change the shape of my porch. Iola stood at my shoulder. Orson and Imogene drifted closer. The flap lifted with a small hiss. I looked inside and felt the floor shift under my feet like a boat catching a wave. What lay in that envelope would not just win the next hearing. It would reroute the past. Inside the envelope lay a thin stack of papers and a small flash drive sealed in clear tape. On top was a cover note typed on an old county letterhead, to be delivered to Harlan Whitaker upon any petition seeking to remove his person from his home. The signature under it belonged to the one person I trusted without question, Lenore. The date was 3 months before she died. My throat closed. I slid out the first page. It was a sworn statement from Lenore to the clerk, witnessed and notarious by Imogene back when she still wore a badge in that building. It said that Maris had asked her for a private loan and had later asked for control of our accounts while Lenore was in the hospital. It said Lenore declined and asked that these documents be preserved in case anyone ever tried a guardianship without medical cause. My past stood up and walked into the room, cleaner than my memory had kept it. Imogene touched the stamp with one fingertip, eyes bright in a way that made her look young. Beneath that came a ledger page from Lenore's old hair studio, handwritten in her neat box letters. It listed a cash withdrawal to cover an off-the-books debt of Calder's, marked with a note that said bridge only, to be repaid by spring. No repayment ever came. The next page was a copy of a quitclaim deed that someone had filled out years ago, transferring my house to a shell company. Signature line left blank, as if waiting for a confused hand. A post-it in Lenore's script said found in kitchen junk drawer after Mara's visit. Did not show H. I felt shame at my own blindness. Then I let it go like a coat that does not fit. Taped to the ledger was a key to a safe deposit box, with a number I recognized from the small branch near the creek where Lenore liked to chat with the teller about roses. Julian lifted her head. That branch is open until 5, she said. We all heard the click as the story turned. At the bank, the vault door sighed and the box lifted out like a lunch pail from another life. Inside sat a certificate of deposit I did not know we had, made out to me, with Iola named as payable on death. It was not huge. It was enough to keep my house from ever being bartered for a bed. The second item was a flash drive labeled in Lenore's printed hand. If anyone uses my sickness to touch Harlan's life without his consent, play this in court. We returned to the courthouse on an emergency motion before the same judge, the one who spoke like he was sanding wood. He allowed the drive. The video filled the screen. Lenore sat in a cardigan I had bought on a whim, her face thinner, her eyes steady. She spoke to the future with the grace of someone who loved a long time. She said, I do not consent to any guardianship for my husband unless 2 independent doctors who have treated him agree it is necessary. She said our daughter is brilliant and stubborn and lately frightened by money. She said this fear could make her hard. Then Lenore did something I will remember when my own words go thin. She smiled at the judge she could not see and said, please treat my husband like a neighbor, not a case. It was not anger that moved the room. It was that quiet line. The judge watched until the end and then folded his hands. Petition dismissed with prejudice, he said. Referral to the prosecutor on suspected fraud and inducement. Temporary order barring Brookside and any agent from contacting Mr. Whitaker or his family regarding placement. He turned to Maris, and his voice softened but did not bend. Ms. Whitaker, do not mistake this dismissal for the end. There are questions here that belong in another courtroom. Maris stared at the table as if she were reading a story she did not like. Calder whispered to his lawyer and drained what color was left in his face. The cream blazer woman closed her folder as if it might bite her. Outside, the sky had the clear blue that follows hard weather. Darby waited on the steps with her notebook, careful as a friend. She asked for a quote. I told her the truth in one sentence. Love is not a power of attorney. It is a promise to tell the truth and to let a man live where his memories know the light switches. That night, I did not celebrate. I made soup, the simple chicken Lenore taught me, and I ate with Orson and Imogene and Iola at the old table that has a burn mark shaped like a comma. We fixed a porch light so it would click on at a kinder hour. Julian called to say the accounts were clean, and the code marigold stood like a gate. Rowan sent a message that she had written her own statement and would appear again if asked. Darby's story went live before midnight. Clean and bright, naming no one without public record, showing the bracelet in a small crop frame and the bank number shielded but clear enough for anyone who knew. Messages arrived from strangers who had seen similar doors open under false light. The prosecutor's office scheduled interviews. The board that held the second judge's brother announced he would step back until questions settled. I breathed in a long, slow way, like a man teaching his lungs how to be ordinary again. In the morning, I stood at the sink and watched my granddaughter butter toast, her shoulders less tight. I told her she could stay as long as she wanted, that the back bedroom could be hers, that we would set rules like roommates who like each other. She smiled and said she would start a list. At 10, Maris knocked. She came alone, hair loose, eyes raw. She stood in the doorway and looked smaller than any age I could name. She said, "I am sorry," and she said it like a person who had run out of clever. She did not blame Calder. She did not accuse me. She placed a check on the table for the first small loan Lenore had marked and a written plan to pay the rest from her new job at a clinic 2 towns over. No Brookside near it. I told her I would not trade my daughter for vengeance, but I would not live under lies. I gave her a copy of Lenore's video. She watched the first minute and cried like rain on a metal roof. She left with an appointment card for a counselor that Imogene knew, tucked into her pocket with the bracelet she had removed. In the weeks that followed, the house did not become a fortress. It became itself. I put a small garden in where the grass had burned out, mums in the marigold shade that Lenore loved. Iola's textbooks salted the coffee table. Orson came by Thursdays and fixed the back steps that had always been slightly wrong. Imogene taught me how to keep a folder where originals sleep and copies travel. The trust sat quiet, the supported decision-making agreement pinned to my cork board, not as a threat to anyone but as a handrail for me. When I walk now, I pass the creek and nod to the kids on bikes and the old men with the dogs who walk like generals. Sometimes I run my thumb over Lenore's ring in my pocket, and I say her name to the air, so the house remembers who built it. I am not bitter. I am simply here. That is the wind no one can market. If Harlan's story moved you, share this with someone who needs a reminder that quiet strength wins. Drop a comment with the words "fence held" so others know they are not alone. Like and subscribe for more true to the bone stories of family, courage, and the law said plain. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story.